All right, good morning.
Good morning.
How's everyone feeling on this rainy morning? Hanging in there. Thank you all for staying for this. I am super excited to be here today with a real rock star group of panelists. And I'll just really quickly get started by saying I'm Ashley Putnam. For those of you who don't know me, I lead the Economic Growth and Mobility Project at the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia. And quite a few of you may have been in attendance a couple weeks ago when we hosted a summit on the topic of economic mobility. So it's really appropriate for us to be here today talking about this work, talking about why it matters to cities to think about how we're promoting entrepreneurship and economic mobility. I also have to say before I get started, every time I speak, because I work for the Fed, I get to say that my views expressed today are mine alone and do not represent the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia or the Federal Reserve System. You ready on this one, Del? With that, I'm going to just really quickly introduce this rockstar panel that I have today, and then we'll get into it. So I know we are in kind of the final hour here. I hope for all of you who have stayed for this day that this is a really good wrap up as to why Tech Week is so important, why we are here, and why this work and this conversation is really critical to promoting upward mobility and to thinking about how we connect economic mobility to good jobs. So to my left is Dr. Del Gines, who I have the privilege of knowing through my work at the Federal Reserve System. Many people think of Del as one of the experts on entrepreneurial ecosystems, but Del does a ton of things. He's also written quite a few books. He currently is at the International Economic Development Council, where he oversees professional development, research conferences, program functions, and manages a $30 million EDA-funded Economic Recovery Corps program, which I think is pretty phenomenal. So give it up for Del. Left of Del, I have Hania Sharp-Brown, also a great colleague and friend in this work. She is the Senior Program Manager of Operations and Strategic Programs at Accenture. She covers both Philly and Pittsburgh and has been really great at strengthening Accenture's relationship with the business community, but also leading the Philly Apprenticeship Network. And I'm really excited to hear from her today about all of the incredible work she's doing. Also, didn't you just give a speech at Temple yesterday?
I did. I was the keynote for Temple's University College graduation. Yes. Adult learners. Thank you. Thank you.
I told you I was a rock star panel, and probably the biggest rock star on this panel,
yes.
Tamia Cotton, who is an IT security analyst right now at Chubb. She is a graduate of Scholas and also a graduate of Chubb's apprenticeship program. Tamia, we're really excited to have you here.
Thank you.
So I mentioned before that my work at the Fed has really been thinking about how we promote economic mobility, how we bring research to action on these topics. And today we're going to be talking about this kind of ecosystem. And really to us that is one of the things we came away from our summit is, I always say, if you're doing it alone, you're doing it wrong. It's really the need to work together, to work collaboratively. And so to start, I'd like to ask all of you, what is your role in the ecosystem of building the tech workforce? And I'll start with you, Del.
Yeah, so IADC is the largest professional association of economic developers in the world. So we're really looking to figure out ways that we can, really drive inclusive prosperity and equitable development. And the ecosystem really is driven a lot by your economic developers that are connected and kind of serve as the intersection between, let's say, government, the community, and the private sector. And a lot of the challenge historically is that economic development has been seen in isolation from a lot of the community work that we do or the entrepreneurship work that we do. Ashley mentioned, for 11 years at the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, all it did was talk about entrepreneurship ecosystems. But in reality, that's like just subtext for a much broader way to think about connectivity across the world and about how we do these things. I really appreciated the last speaker on the panel, the brother that just made the exit, because he talked about the concept of empathy, which is rare that you hear, but I think that's the foundation of the next evolution of effective economic development, is looking at how people connect together, how people understand each other, and then they mobilize capital, energy, talent, and resources to produce productive gain for everybody. So our role at IEDC, especially under our new president, Nathan Oley, who brought me on, is really to figure out how to do that. How do we better connect people, together? How do we get our economic developers to think about what it means to exist within community and drive growth that way? And then how do we help, people see the next generation of what is coming down? We're going to talk about AI for sure, but not just AI, but the other technology, the other ways of human experience, the other things that go into what it really means to drive growth over the long run.
Great. Amazing.
So my role leading our Philadelphia Apprenticeship Network is really to let other companies and people know that apprenticeship is a model that actually works. It's not something that Accenture just created. You know, when you talk about diversifying your talent pool, when you talk about meeting people where they are, we are showing that apprentices are a model. So the Philadelphia Apprenticeship Network is a free network. I like to say it's free 99 for employers, nonprofit partners, education systems to join to really discuss best practices on how to develop an apprenticeship program for your organization. Accenture, we established ours in 2016 in Chicago. Since then, we have launched 11 apprenticeship networks across the country. And we don't just say to organizations, you should do this. We walk you through how to do it. We have a public-facing playbook that tells you all of the best practices that we use, and you can take the best of it, you can see or use the rest of it, like you don't have to use it all, but it's really around ensuring and letting people know that apprenticeships do work, i.e. someone like Tamia. And so my work is really around being a champion, being an advocate. I think the most important voice when we talk about apprentices are the actual apprentices, because I can talk about this work ad nauseum because I'm passionate about it, but that was not my lived experience going through a program like that. And so I really think when you start to get in front of companies and they're asking, you know, what's the bottom line? Why is this important? Talk to the voices. Talk to the individuals who are going through these programs who can show you how it's been life-changing. When I was on this panel last year, I was moderating it, and one of our apprentices, Dominique McFall, talked about how important being able to change her family's life and going through an apprenticeship program. And so it's not just about trendy words or saying you did it. You have testimonies of why that work is important.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to have you here. You know, when we talk about upward mobility, right, what we tend to be thinking about is moving people up in career pathways, moving people up in skills. And as economists, a lot of us, like at the Fed, we like to sit around and kind of look at these big data and numbers. Well, it's really about people, right? It's about people who are taking steps that are often difficult and challenging, that require employer buy-in. And to me, you've been through this, right? You've gone through boot camp. You got this role. Like, I'd really love to hear about, you know, what worked, what helped you feel prepared. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
So my journey started at Scholas. It was a tech boot camp where I was trained to earn my CISA Plus certification from CompTIA. And there I learned a lot of professional development skills along with the technical skills, which helped me thrive in a corporate office where I work at now at Chubb. I'm an IT analyst there, IT security analyst there. One of the main things that I really believe that worked a lot, specifically at Scholas, is that there was a lot of flexibility when it came to learning in a schedule. They were there every step of the way to support you, and they offered a lot of support solutions, like if you needed transportation to get back and forth, they're really there to make sure that you get to the end and that you succeed at the end. And then coming into Chubb, I came into Chubb as an apprentice through our apprenticeship program, and I graduated recently last year, at the end of the year, and it was an amazing program. I also learned more. I learned more professional development skills, a lot of technical skills, and just different skills to build my network, build my career, and build my education.
Amazing. So tell me a little bit, what impact has that had going through all of these steps over this, it sounds like a pretty short period of time too, so I'm impressed. First of all, let's give Tamia a round of applause just for what you're doing. Tell me how that's impacted your life.
Well, I started this journey in 2023. I pivoted from working at Amazon, worked at a warehouse in Amazon, to working in a corporate office in about 3 months. I started my journey at Scholas at 2023 in July, and I was at Chubb by December in their apprenticeship program. So it was a quick transition. It was a great transition, and it's made a big impact on my life. I am now able to work around peers who are pursuing the same things as I am and want to see me succeed and grow. It's had a big impact on my community as well, because I've been able to recommend Scholas and bring more people that I know to the program and help them build their skills and break into tech as well. So it's had a huge impact on my life and the trajectory of it.
Amazing. So Tamia, when I hear your story, the other thing, of course, I think about systems, right, and how they work together and who's in them. And I'm hearing a series of things. You have a great organization like Scholas, you have apprenticeship programs, you have an employer like Chubb that is committed to doing this. Del, I'm gonna turn this over to you. I'm gonna mix things up a bit here, but we had this conversation yesterday about, we did some research at the Philly Fed where we were asking, in Philadelphia, what do residents of this city think they need in order to move up the economic ladder? And the answer wasn't even necessarily training or education. What people told us is they want a better job. And when we talk about this ecosystem, right, what we often find is the training programs are having a conversation over here. The people who do economic development are having a conversation over here. We're not talking together. And so, Del, I'm curious, as you think about workforce and economic development and how these are often such siloed conversations, how do we get more folks to work together so we can have more stories like Tamia's?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important question. So just for context, I was born and raised and still live in Omaha, Nebraska. Yes, Doris, there are black people in Omaha, Nebraska. Well, I'm half black, so there is at least half of one. You know, and at one point we had the highest black childhood poverty rate in the nation and the third adult poverty rate in the nation. And I was born, raised, lived there, did my early banking career there. So by the time I got to the Fed, you know, and started working on economic development, it was that particular lived experience which drove a lot of the ecosystem work. And then I did 5 years in the poorest zip code in Kansas, 66101, in a program called EconAv, which was a grassroots ecosystem, community-based economic development program. I've never seen anything like it in the nation, but definitely not in the Fed. And 5 years spending time with that community, trying to mobilize across the ground and bring, you know, everybody together to execute. And I think I want to make 2 points about both of those particular experiences that I think will resonate with you. The first is that, you know, the people that we want to serve within the ecosystem need to be the center of the ecosystem, which means that you have to have a level of, again, going back to empathy and human-centered design. So the challenge has been is if you see how systems have evolved, they tend to evolve through like professionalized verticals. So you have an economic development, bureaucracy, workforce development, and then each one is talking about what they know best. But what happens is the individual becomes decentered from any of those particular systems. So when I did a national research on black women entrepreneurs, and one of the things that, you know, I found when I was going through that research is that if you center the black women in the conversation, it's not just a conversation about workforce. It's not just a conversation about housing. It's not just a conversation about entrepreneurship. Black women are 60% of all black businesses in the black community. But it's the integrated whole. But when you try to serve each particular section, the whole person gets lost. And so the promise of ecosystem building for me of entrepreneurship, but also now these advanced network-based solutions that we're trying to develop to serve people, is you got to recenter the individual back into that. It has to be human-centered design, and then you build the professional support systems and the cultural support systems around the experiences of that person. And if you do that, it requires a level of empathy because you have to understand what they need, how they move, how they think, what they're trying to see about their world. And then you have to help them see that vision and execute the vision for their life. So when we talk about economic mobility, what we're really talking about is organizing systems around the human experience to take them from this particular point in their life and their experience in their community, as well as their families, to the next. And it's just a fundamentally different way of looking at economic development. But if we really want to see communities thrive in the promise of America in terms of equitable development, I've been talking a lot about Thomas Jefferson, you know, the pursuit of, you know, liberty, all of those different kind of things, then we have to look at the world a different way. And I think that's where ecosystem building, whether it's entrepreneurship specific or in general, comes into play. Because if we don't do it, the train of AI is coming, the accelerated, you know, wealth gap, which is only going to increase, is coming. The marginalizations of humans across the United States and also the world is coming. But right now, I'm challenging you that we can stand in that gap if we modify our frame and how we pursue development.
Great. All right, that's a word. Yeah, I'm going to come back to some of the work you lead at Accenture, and I'm again thinking about I love this because something I'm really passionate about is how do we center humanity in the work that we do, right? Again, back to, we look at a lot of numbers at the Fed, but we don't think about the people behind those numbers. How do you think about that as you're both at Accenture, how you're building these programs, how you're thinking about that talent pipeline in your workforce? And are there some strategies that you would recommend from your organization for others to think about how you're really building that long-term success for people to move up the ladder?
Yeah, I mean, I think collaboration is key. You heard Tamia talk about the different steps into the apprenticeship program at Chubb. Chubb is a member of the Philadelphia Apprenticeship Program. Hassan Charles was my partner in crime and and good trouble, I'm not gonna say crime. But my partner in a lot of work that we're doing, because the reality is we are not experts in everything. And I think particularly for Philadelphia, and I can say this because I'm born and raised in Philadelphia, we operate in silos. And so it speaks to what you mentioned earlier around this person is talking about this over here, this person is talking about this over, but we're not talking to each other, even though we're doing a lot of the same work, right? And so those collaborations are key. We work very closely with the Chamber of Commerce, right? Because they are the convener of the business community. And so when you talk about trying to get other corporations and businesses across the region to understand the why, we rely on the chamber to help convene that. We also work with the Community College of Philadelphia as a sustainability partner. Again, when you talk about recruiting talent, or even as colleges are preparing different curriculum, as they're training folks coming through their 2-year programs, it goes again back to collaboration. And then you have other community colleges across the region as well. And then PhilaWorks. I sit on the board of PhilaWorks here in the city of Philadelphia, which is the city's workforce development arm. They're a sustainability partner, right? And because we have to start talking about these opportunities, not just in the trades. And this is not a slight to the trades. I have a son who's a senior in high school who's also going into the trades. But the same way you look at the trades and these pipelines to opportunities, they are also available in the corporate space, right? I also look at it as a legacy, quite frankly. I think somebody on the panel said it earlier, like investing in the people. It's not enough to just hire workers into these positions. You want to keep them. You have to maintain them. Tamia mentioned some of the wraparound services that are offered when you're going through these all of those things are necessary, and it's not a one-size-shoe fits all. And so I'm a big component of collaboration over competition. That's what works for us at Accenture. That's what works for our ecosystem partners. I am not an HR person, right? And so I have to make sure that I'm partnering with HR teams around data, what we should be looking for. Again, going back to, it's not just about hiring people into these roles. Are we keeping them, and are we training other people internally as we're bringing in new talent?
Yeah.
And what she said is a much more practical way of what I said. But what she said is what needs to be done on steroids.
Yeah. So Tamia, when you were navigating this, right, you set out with your journey, did you know you wanted to work in tech? Or was it, what did you think about as you were starting to get into these programs? And honestly, part of this is about navigating, right? Like, we're talking about all these systems that aren't working together, but it's also about the human experience of you being able to find the resources you need to get through that. So I'm curious if you could share a little more about how you found it, what it was like to move through it.
I always knew I wanted to get into tech, but I was realizing that it was becoming a barrier for me to get into the actual field because I didn't have experience or the credentials to get into the field. So when I was looking for resources to help me break into tech, when I found Scholas, I felt like that was a great opportunity for me specifically, just because if that's where I want to be in the future, that's where I need to be now, so that I can grow and have that experience. And then once I have those credentials, I have something else to show for it as well. So navigating through it was challenging to find a space where I could grow at first, but then once I came to Scholas and then going to Chubb and their apprenticeship program, I found a place where people were invested in me and wanted to see me grow. And they also have training programs and different ways for me to become more educated in my field or any other field that I want to go into or I want to grow into as I continue my career.
Why'd you want to get into tech?
So I wanted to get in tech ever since I was a young lady because I was in a summer camp that was for engineering, and ever since then I always wanted to become an engineer or go into software development, and now it's cybersecurity for me. So I feel like I found my niche and my spot.
Nice. Cybersecurity is big.
I'm sorry, can I break in? I asked that question for a specific purpose because it's kind of proven the point both of us have just made, is like you had somebody that first had to be triggered by an experience and see an opportunity, then had to continue on and find a pathway forward, then had to have a wraparound system of both systems and individuals that supported her, and then positioned her, and now she is here. All of that is a process that had to be in place, and she eloquently kind of explained to you all that process. Now take that and exponentially multiply that around where you want humanity to go, individuals to go in the labor market. That's kind of what we're talking about if you want to distill it down into its most common form.
Very well said. And I was going to say, you said cybersecurity, so I'm going to pivot to something that I'm hearing a lot in the market. We look at different places there are opportunities for growth in markets and where we see skills connecting to opportunity. We have a great tool at the Philadelphia Fed called the Occupational Mobility Explorer. Everyone go check this out. That is really trying to help, at least from a research side, think about what skills do folks need to build on to get into those jobs that provide sustainability and stability. And this is a big conversation today, but there's also kind of fear on the other side. And of course, I would be remiss at Tech Week to not talk about AI and how that's changing and shaping our labor market. And I think one of the concerns is, are we building pathways to jobs that won't be there? So Del, I'm going to pivot back to you. I think that's the question here we're talking about. Are we setting up the workforce for long-term success given this rapid pace of AI change? And I know that this is something you've been leading work around at IEDT, so yeah.
No, we are not. And
yeah, quick answer.
Next question. The Pollyannish view that I've been hearing people even at this conference talk about AI is just that. It's a Pollyannish view. I don't think it's a realistic view. Like, you have a technology that is unique in human history that can do things no other historical technology has done across multiple verticals, from the repetitive nature of routine tasks, disrupting that, to the creative space, and the ability to ultimately begin to think and redesign itself at scale. Never has happened in the history of the world. Every other technology has required human agency. We build a nuclear bomb, president says you go drop it over here, right? This has the ability to literally begin to redesign and develop itself in a meaningful way and have a completely different way of thinking about the world. And then you apply that into these systems that we've been talking about, and you have to take a much more aggressive and assertive approach, in my opinion, to what is going to be done. Because I remember when we were at the Fed, like even 2019, we were telling everybody, yeah, just go into coding, you're going to have a job forever.
Yep.
Now you got Lovable, right? Now you got these things where you put a prompt in and it can produce, like, I built a whole website over the weekend. I aggregated all the economic development policies in Nebraska and Omaha to give it to our folks in our Black community to make more strategic decisions because they're not invested in that space. Never been done. I did it in 2 weekends, and then I took a free website, had Jim and I create the code with all the information in it, and then created 3 custom GPTs, sent it out to my community and said, look, if you want to develop a strategy, all you got to do is type stuff into here, and now you can look at every single incentive that we have. Me, I don't know how to code at all. All I know is how these things work. So we have to massively accelerate both how we do policy around artificial intelligence and how we upskill people around artificial intelligence. And most importantly, and this is a hope for you, you all need to be more in the rooms of the high-level companies and the people that are making policy and decisions, because as reflections of your community, there's conspicuous absence in your voice, the voice of the workforce developer, the voice of the community member, the voice of the young folks coming from there, and they're making these decisions in these vortex vacuumous spaces, right, that are going to have the most significant impact, I feel, on a technology in American history. So that's the long answer to my question, my answer of no.
The short answer was no, though. I like that. Hania, when you guys think about changing technology and what you're doing at Accenture, particularly as you're thinking about how you're building your workforce, how do you address those concerns?
Yeah, so as Del and I were talking about this earlier, I was like, so you think AI is just going to take all the jobs? And he's like, yes. Like, period, yes. And for me, I think there's an and, right? And I could be optimistic, I'm not sure. But I think there's an opportunity that doesn't get talked about enough about who's behind the scenes developing this technology. And I think it's a missed opportunity for, when you talk about upskilling talent, like, who are the people creating this? So when you talk about the voices that are not in the room, somewhat similar to when, like, I was born in the 80s, so I got to see it before the internet happened and when the internet happened, right? And everybody was like all in a fit, like, oh my God, what is this gonna mean? AI obviously is way bigger than that, right? But I think there are access opportunities, there's education awareness. Are jobs going to go away? Yes. But are there also opportunities behind that? Yes, and earlier this year in January, Accenture released a report called Workforce and Workers, and it really talks about, reinventing the age of workforce in the age of generative AI.
Yeah.
And it's a 10-minute read, it's public facing, so anybody can look it up. But in short, it says that Gen AI is likely the most significant change to workforce since the agricultural and industrial revolution. Reinventors are breaking out of silos and building trust among the people. And I think one of the common themes that we've heard since the session this morning is around centering people around this technology and centering people around the work that we're doing. And that we're bringing data. And if you have access and education and centering people, there are huge benefits to it. I think it's easy for us to default to what we can't have as a result of it versus shifting mindset as to what is possible with it.
Yeah, I like that. Tamia, I'm curious, how do you think about this as a grad of a program? You're in cybersecurity. I'll say cybersecurity for us at the Fed is a huge need. It's something we see across the board is a growth area. There's need for more and more cybersecurity. But do you think about AI and technology at all in your work that you do?
Yes, cybersecurity and AI are both relatively new fields. And I think it's a great opportunity for early career people to get into. But I think the gap where it comes from is being educated in it. Cybersecurity degrees are new. They're new. It's one of the newer degrees to colleges and even certifications. And in AI, being able to get educated and training in AI, you need people to develop these programs, to develop the actual training for it. And then you're going to need people to power the AI and to build it into something better. So I think it's a great opportunity. Cybersecurity is such a cool field to be in. There's so many different departments of it and so many different ways and different places that you can pivot into. And one thing that I've learned at Chubb and at Scholas is that every company can be a tech company because you need that tech support in that company, no matter what the business is. And you're going to need that cybersecurity support to secure everything wherever you're at, or whatever company you're at.
Yeah,
so.
Very well said, very well said. So we're here to talk about tech jobs as they connect to economic mobility. And one of the questions here was really about how do we make sure when we're doing training, we're not just producing workers with trained skills, but we're really giving people upward mobility. I'll give this quote. We had some folks come speak at the summit who shared, what does economic mobility mean to you? And one of our takeaways was, we measure it as economists sometimes intergenerationally, but for the folks we were talking to, it was about being able to pay the bills, knowing you had stability, knowing you had predictable income. It was also about things we don't measure a lot, like agency or dignity, or feeling like you had a good quality of life. Mm-hmm. So we think about economic mobility through a little bit of a different lens. How do we make sure that these are good jobs we're connecting folks to? And I say this specifically because I've heard from folks in focus groups we've done that not all tech jobs are providing that stability and that consistency. So some tech jobs are really excellent ones and great fields that provide you that upward mobility. And I think my question to the panel in general is how do we make sure that as we're training folks, they're getting those opportunities and it's not, a 1-month contract here or a 2-month contract there, but these are those jobs that are really providing people those desires they have for a good quality of life. I'm like, Tyler, who wants to jump in?
So I think one of the things that always stay top of mind is this expectation when you talk about talent, that talent has to come to us, to the company, versus we need to go to the communities of the very places we say we want to hire from, right? And so with Accenture and the work that we do around our apprenticeship program, we've partnered with several organizations, right? Because again, we're not the expert in everything. So for example, in the Bronx last year, we launched a Bronx Talent Hub in partnership with People Shores. And that hub sits in the middle of the Bronx, which is one of the poorest zip codes and districts in New York City, right? And so you talk about going to that community. We've partnered with the New York Jobs CEO Council as well, as a part of the work we do with our high school apprenticeship program. We launched a pre-apprenticeship program. And so even when I think about the talent pipeline, it's not just starting with folks who maybe didn't finish college, who maybe changed their career. I consider our high school programs the start of that talent pipeline. We have a nationwide high school internship program. And so when I have seniors that come through that program who've gone through a Launchpad or a Scholas or coded differently, when you talk about those, or these are folks that are already coming into our program with certifications, which makes them qualified for the next step.
Yep.
And so it's not like when I was in high school and you were told like you need to wait until. These are young people coming through the doors already with certifications that are prepared for these next jobs. And so for me, I think it goes back to, again, minimizing this expectation that talent needs to come to us. We need to be going to the communities, right? And you need to rely on people from the community to be your voice. Like, the messenger matters as well. And I think people forget that because, again, sometimes we operate in silos or we think we have to be the owner of everything. But I think it's just a mindset shift. Like, the way we've always done it clearly does not always work. Yeah. And so what's the worst thing that's going to happen if you try something new?
Yeah.
It could work.
It could work.
Look.
Right, there we go. There we go. What do you think, Del, as we think about those tech jobs?
I think we need to do more panels together because she's great at translating my abstraction. Like, everything she said was centered to human-centered design. You know what we're talking about. You got to go to the people. You got to see the community. You got to listen. You got to hear. You got to build to suit. You know, all of that stuff you were taught in tech. Design thinking, empathy mapping, user experience applied on a human system, right? A community development, economic development system. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about. And specific to answer that question, so I spent a year facetiously while I was at the Fed trying to get the word job eliminated. And and I have a rationale for it. It didn't work, but I have a rationale for it. You know, I wanted to call it something like economic productive unit, right? But here, listen, hear me out, fam. Like, this is why. This is why. Because the concept of job immediately affixes somebody's, identity, both economic and personally, to something else, right? Like, it affixes it to the small business owner, the corporate sector, or whatever. They provide, you consume, this is your identity, and this is how you live. But most people, especially as you see the economy beginning to shift, are doing multiple things to generate what their household needs. Black women have a full-time job and a part-time business. That in total is the economic productive unit. And so when you start separating out, different pieces of how folks move to make that income happen, you start measuring things in silos. So it's not, you got to think of silos not just in, she does apprenticeships, I do economic development, right? Because in fact, they're both parts of economic development. But think about it also in data. So if I look at jobs in abstention to entrepreneurship, and people are doing both, I'm not seeing their whole picture. Again, I'm not centering the person in what we're trying to do. And so I think we fundamentally need to look at how people are producing what they need to survive and thrive differently, not just as individuals, but also within the context of their community, because that really, really matters. And so then that gets us to the second question is how do we make it better? Where clearly the pace of change is faster than what we've ever seen before. And so that requires a different way of thinking about how we do things as well. Things have to be more nimble. I wrote a guide at the Fed called The Case for Youth Entrepreneurship Education. And in it, I said, it's not just enough for schools to teach more entrepreneurship. Schools have to be more entrepreneurial themselves, faster, more nimble, more parallel education systems in the community, churches, whatever it takes, where things can move and pivot fast, and we're not affixed to such strong bureaucratic systems that it takes 100 years to change. Because you know who gets harmed the most? People that need it the most. So if it takes 10 years to change, and the cycle of technology is moving on a yearly exponential pace, then the people that need it the most tend to be the ones that are left behind. So those are kind of like 30,000 foot level things of what we need to begin to frame our advocacy on as it comes to workforce development.
Great point.
Can I add? I just want to add to Del's point, like credentials and potential. Historically, we always talk about like the credentials that people need to have, right? that lived experience is such an asset that so many people underestimate when you're talking about hiring talent. Transferable skills. You know, even when I think about when we bring our interns in, I don't always want the A student, quite frankly. Sometimes I do want the F student because there's some transferable skills that they just not have been able to tap into, quite frankly, because no one has challenged them or no one has presented that opportunity. And so I think I go back to the end, it has to be credentials and potential, and people have to start really looking at the lived experience and how that is valuable to your organization, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're, you know, Fortune 500 company.
Yeah. I want to pick on two things that Del said that I really, one, the research we just did, this was something we found when we asked people, what do you do for work? They're going to give you a really limited answer. We were doing a survey. They're going to tell you, this is, you know, this job that I have. But when we asked people what you do for income, we got a whole range of other answers. And we actually did some focus groups on this. And most people in our focus group, they call side hustles, right? You got a, you know, I got a little thing I do over here. I got a couple of them. A lot of people are doing multiple things to try to make ends meet. And I think sometimes we're remiss to assume you're either a worker or an entrepreneur. Because these systems also work together, whether or not people are able to start a business or find a good job. We did a survey of workers a few years ago, and we asked people at the end, this was post-pandemic, so it was a pretty big shift in our labor market. Arguably, maybe we're going through another big shift in our labor market with AI and the new tech revolutions, but we asked people, what do you think you want to do in the future? And we were shocked how many people said, I'm actually kind of done with the labor market, I'm starting a business. And solopreneurs were a really big deal. And it was a huge finding of that study was, it wasn't, I'm gonna switch fields or I'm gonna get a different job. It was, I'm gonna start something altogether. And so I appreciate that this is kind of bringing the conversations we've had over the course of, honestly, over the course of all of Tech Week together, because these are all parts of that ecosystem that promotes economic mobility. So to that end, I want to end talking about partnerships. Collaboration is a favorite word. You said this really well earlier, Hadia. This is like, you can't do it alone, right? And as we think about building more resilient cities that make real pathways for people in tech, I'm curious what you think about in terms of those partnerships across education, across industry and government. How do we actually come together in a way that is sustainable as well, to not just do collaboration in theory? I used to joke that, you know, they tell you need to have a collaborator and you would like go get your grant and you'd find someone to write a support letter. That doesn't necessarily mean you're collaborating, right? See, some of y'all do fundraising, you know exactly what I'm talking about. What does it mean for us to really, really sustainably do collaboration across these sectors?
I'm interested in hearing what you have
Yeah,
to say as somebody
me
just
too.
coming into this.
Right,
All right, let's go.
right.
I think partnership and collaboration is definitely a big, important way to bridge the gap between early career people and finding their career. Because Scholas is partnership with Chubb, which is also in partnership with the apprentice program, and that pipeline has helped me get to where I am. So I feel like we need to create more spaces where people in early career can dive straight into that and have the awareness of it. I also feel like it's about communication and letting people know. Most people don't know what resources they have available to them in their city or even right next to them. So making everything aware, having the marketing, and people actually taking an opportunity to actually do it and apply. Some people are scared to go into tech. Some people are scared to apply these programs. They're like, I don't know anything, or I don't have any prior experience or skills. Well, most of the time when you get there, you get trained. And even when you come to start a new position at any job, any place, there's some type of training. Yeah. So there's always a resource there for you. And those partnerships and that awareness between it is really gonna make everybody else thrive and have success.
Yeah, and your story is a great story of partnership,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
As you're thinking about this as it relates to the apprenticeship network, what do you think?
You can't be hoarders of information. Like, we can't take none of this stuff with us. Some of it is like so basic, but I said earlier around collaboration over competition because I remember I've been with Accenture going on 4 years, and I did workforce development work when I worked for the city of Philadelphia, but it wasn't until I was at Accenture that I was like really like knee deep diving into it, right? And I remember starting to convene some of the folks who I knew were like the experts in this space. And sometimes I would get questions like, well, you know, they've never worked together, and I don't know how that's gonna go. And I'm like, but why not? Like, imagine if we all just combine the actual resources that we're talking about individually. You talk about the will to solve a problem. We know what needs to be done to create these opportunities and create sustainable, life-sustaining careers and opportunities for people. Do we actually have the will, or do we want to hoard the information because selfless, you want it to be about you? This work cannot be about one person. Like, I'm big on that. People don't always like it, but like, I'm not doing this for me. Yep. There are people who really deserve and need these opportunities, not given to them. They've earned it. They deserve it. And if we are sitting up here hoarding information because I need to be the center of it, then we're going to keep having this conversation. Every 10 years, we're going to keep having the same conversation. We know what needs to be done. People have to be dogmatic about it. It's not a fast process. And quite frankly, even if we only impact one person, you got to keep going. Like, that's one person, you got to just stick with it.
Yep.
I mean, and I'm going to come at it, at a 30,000-foot level again, because she's 100% right. But here's the reality. Like, collaboration and network management is not taught. And so when we say, well, you should just collaborate, people are not taught that. We're taught hierarchy, we're taught vertical, we're taught competition. It's you versus me, whether it's for funding or for market share or even for shine and identity, right? Yep. And so when we say collaboration, you have a whole group of people that have never been trained to know how to work across a network of people with sometimes quiet competing interests. And so this is the center of ecosystem building, right? And so we first have to begin to train people on how to create what I call tables of intent. Bring a group of people around a table for a specific purpose, for a specific group of people or cause, and helping them work through how to navigate the natural tensions that arise in any relationship. I mean, a lot of y'all can't even get along and collaborate with your family. So now you want to talk about, doing it at a much larger scale. Well, we need to create and facilitate education, training, mentorship, and also modeling the way for how to do these things. Because the dividends, the upfront investment is going to be high, but the return on investment is massive when you do it. And then the second piece that I want to talk about, and I'm very, very big on this, almost to the point where I'm dogmatic, is you really need to look who gets invited to the table. Because oftentimes, even when we try collaboration, we take the lowest hanging fruit. But I had a saying forever. I said, if you want to do community development for real, it's messy. I mean, I've been cussed out a lot of times, and I probably cussed some people out too during the process as well. But when you get in the community, you're dealing with folks that have, very aggressive ways or sidewinding missions, and you're trying to bring them all together and navigate that, and it's messy. And because we like sanitize, we like people that are buttoned up and are professional, and how we talk to each other is very important, right? They're not used to people coming from, where was Fresh Prince born?
West Philadelphia,
born and raised. Like, they don't understand how those people necessarily communicate culturally, and therefore they isolate them from the table. But that's the very voice that often they need when we talk about that. So it's being very thoughtful about the table. It's being very thoughtful about how you organize and help facilitate and moderate the collaboration. Once you get that kind of organic momentum going, then you're going to see these massive dividends, because now what us three can do together is synergistic. It's dramatically greater than what each of us could do as individuals.
Yeah. Amazing. I think that's a great way to, so I'm gonna have y'all wrap. You got 3 minutes. You got rapid fire here. And I'm gonna start with Tamia. We're gonna look out at this audience and say, this has been an incredible time at Tech Week. And I'm thinking about what advice you have for people prioritizing economic mobility. So like one quick sentence, what advice would you give this room in terms of what people should do to prioritize economic mobility?
Network. You never know who's in your network. And I feel as though having the skills and knowing how to use your network and further your career or further anybody else's career, help anybody else out, is a very important skill to have. A lot of times when you're in places like this, people might not speak or may not speak to you or be afraid to network. I know as me, being someone that's new to this environment, I am a little bit more afraid to speak to other people, but I go out there and I try to. So being able to network and building that community.
Amazing.
I say don't just drop the idea. Be prepared to also roll your sleeves up and do the work. A lot of people drop ideas on people, and we should try this, we should do this, and then the minute you ask them to action that idea and item, it's kind of like, oh, well, I was just suggesting. No, you're going to drop that idea, be prepared to roll up your sleeves and do the work as well.
They say we, but they mean you.
Exactly.
I would say love yourself, love people, love your community, listen, be a servant leader.
Amazing, amazing. Well, you see what I meant by this being a rockstar panel, so I want to take a second to thank this panelist. It's great to be able to be together here for Tech Week, and I think my hope is that we come away with this, one, with some hope and encouragement that this is work that can be done, that we can create more stories like Tamia's, but also with a little bit of fire under us, that this is really important, and that for us to do this, we need to put aside ego, and we need to prioritize people and humanity in this work, and I think that is one of my big takeaways from this conversation. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you all for
Thank
staying
you.
and hanging out here.